The Eradicators and the Predators. Two lines of robots Dr. Xenon has created to destroy the GDA. Since the release of TDX, these two flagship boss types have been pretty much the mascots of the game, with their fights being some of the best and most memorable parts. However, given that both lines of robots are so popular, it's left many, including myself, wondering, which family of robots are stronger? Well, to answer that, I simply decided to ask one of the developers, Marcus Lee, this very question. And his response, let's just say, was pretty blunt. He said that the Eradicators are stronger than the Predators. Not only that, he further went on to explain that it wasn't even close. But I wondered, how is that? Why is that? Why are the Eradicators so much stronger than the Predators? What evidence in the game do we have to support this? And why would Xenon still make the Predators if the Eradicators are just better? Fellas, these are the questions that I am going to answer today in this very video. So without further ado, please be sure to like, subscribe, and let's jump into it. So the first thing that we're going to have to do here is explain the difference between the Eradicators and the Predators. First of all, there's a time difference. The Eradicators, we know, were created while Dr. Xenon was still with the Global Defense Army. We see that the Proto-Eradicator was prototyped and shown off in the tutorial mode of the game, where she was still just trying to get a hold of the core overheating issue. Furthermore, we see the markings of Forge Industries, which is this triangle symbol present on all of the Eradicator variants, which shows that their parts were created with the Forge, the same company that helped her create the Golden Towers as well as the other futuristic things that we see in the GDA's army. The Predators, on the other hand, were made at a later date. We can tell this because they completely lack this triangular symbol and instead are outfitted with purely X symbols, which is obviously Xenon's marking signature. Another difference between these two robotic types is the fact that the Predators are half zombie, at least the lower tier Predators. We don't really know what Apex is, but considering that he was able to be corrupted, there has to be some sort of organic material in there. So yeah, I guess he's a zombie too. But the Predators are zombies. Well, Destructor, well, we don't know anything about Destructor's anatomy. He could be a full robot or he could be a zombie. I'm willing to think that he's a zombie inside because the other Predator type enemies are zombies. But yeah, they're essentially modified zombies with augmentations and robotics built up around them. Obviously, they've been mutated, likely with the same mutations used to create the mutated X-Scientists where they're big and buff, just like the Predators. However, they have the addition of enhancements to their biomechanics, such as the shotgun arm and, in Apex's case, basically his whole body. Eradicators, on the other hand, are alive. We can see this simply from the creature that is inside. We've seen their X-rays before, kind of seeing the anatomy of an Eradicator, what makes them tick. And it's very clear that there is a living, breathing Titan inside of these robotic shells. And that is the core, that is one of the biggest differences between an Eradicator and a Predator. The Eradicators are alive, and the Predators are not. Despite being robots, Eradicators still feel emotions. They can be angry, they can feel pain, they can feel fear, they react to the situations around them. Notice how every Eradicator has a rage mode of some kind, a second phase where they become more animalistic and act more irrationally. Notice how the Predators, no Predator has that. Destructor doesn't have a rage mode, Apex doesn't have a rage mode, the normal Predators don't have a rage mode, and also notice their sound effects. Predators are strictly robotic. They have very predictable motions and patterns, and when they die, they don't scream out in rage, they just kind of fall over. Or in Apex's case, he's programmed to self-destruct. Eradicators, on the other hand, will fight to the last breath and either escape or just blow up. They resist death. They try their absolute hardest to either escape and prevent death or to just try and fight till their last, standingness. Last man standing! Last man standing reference! Anyway, this tenacity shown with the Eradicators, this hyperactive train of thought, this willingness to survive or the willingness to just complete the mission, makes the Eradicator's thought process just on such a higher level than the Predators. And this is likely what contributes to the core overheating problem. Their intelligence and their resourcefulness is their downfall. They push their arsenals to the absolute limit. Predators just kind of do what they have to do, and then once their mission is complete, they'll try and they'll just self-destruct or just die. You'll notice this with Corrupted Apex, where he's programmed to destroy his core, but since it's not there, he just can't really do anything, and so he just turns off, shuts down. Which just goes to show that, hey, the Predators, once they finish their programming, they're essentially just a blank slate. They don't really do anything. Eradicators, on the other hand, they think for themselves, they get angry, they can get hurt, they feel emotions. We've had this whole debacle with Eradicator Mark IV where his lyrics say, "save me" in them, which would indicate a higher level of thinking than others. They're capable of some sort of speech and other sorts of things, with the sound effects that they make and all those other things, and in general, they're just more sophisticated. But where does she even get the bodies for these things? Like with the Predators, it's understandable because there's zombies everywhere and she can obviously mutate these zombies. The Eradicators are not zombies, they clearly think for themselves, so where does she even get the Titans for them? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tie it all together. I think she got the Titans from Frosty's army. Frosty's army is the source of the Ice Titans. That is where the whole race comes from. That is where we've seen them, and that is just generally where they are. In the winter event, we learned that Dr. Xenon was sent up there to deal with Frosty in the Tower Battles 2019 event. During that time, she was able to create Fortress Snowland, which is the whole base that she designed. We see that by the time of the tutorial mode, in the note present in the tutorial, Fortress Snowland already exists, and that is where they are housing the Calamity Energy. Which means that Dr. Xenon has built this fortress, but she hasn't really been there just yet. She's been back in the Raven's Nest working on her Eradicators. Now, we see that the Proto-Eradicator is not organic in any way. It's just a robot tied to a tank tread. However, the note is pretty urgent, meaning that after the tutorial's events, Dr. Xenon likely went back up to the north at Fortress Snowland, which is where the infamous picture with her and Dr. Mallory was taken. It is my theory that this is where the birth of the Eradicators was. She started to take the Ice Titans that were up north with Frosty and combine them with the Calamity Crystal, creating the cores. This would explain why the Eradicators are so powerful, why they're so advanced, and also why they would overheat. It's running on literally the energy of hell, and it's powering this autonomous robot that can think and feel and act for itself. So it would make a lot of sense as to why this thing would overheat constantly. I have no doubt that she was using the Calamity Energy beforehand, which is why the Proto-Eradicator erupted like he did, but I have no doubt that actually using living Titans just exacerbated the issue. Also, it would tie in an extra layer of horror to poor Frosty's army, because Xenon was literally taking their young, essentially, and putting them into these robots. But that also explains why she would still make Predators. Think about it. Dr. Xenon has more than one of each Eradicator. There's multiple different Eradicator Mark 1s and Mark 2s and Mark 1 Combats and Mark 4s. However, there's not an endless supply of Ice Titans. We see that by the time Selgar is around, well, he's the only one left, at least of that size. Xenon has a finite number of Eradicators, which kind of proven also by the amount of Eradicator empty shells that we see all strewn all over the place that she just doesn't need anymore because she's already made as many Titans as she can. Predators, on the other hand, just require zombies, and, well, there's an abundance of those. She can very easily make more Predators, which is why she mass produces them. And this is not to put down the Predators, it's not like the Predators are weak, but they're not as strong as the Eradicators. So she can just use the mass-produced zombies that were left behind by the Void and just, create her little army. But yeah, that's really all I got for this mini theory. If you enjoyed, please be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye.